It was my first day at work at the company. I introduced myself in front of all the employees. I am Mark Johnson, who will be serving as the exclusive writer. In the middle of my self-introduction, I found myself at a loss for words. Unbelievably, the woman I thought I would never see again was standing right before me. What? Why is Susan here? As I widened my eyes in surprise, Susan also widened her eyes. I never dreamed that I would ever meet my ex-wife, who I divorced 2 years ago, in this way. My name is Mark Johnson. I am a divorced man turning 30 this year. Since my divorce last year, I have been living alone. My ex-wife Susan was a wonderful woman, 3 years older than me. She was very beautiful, youthful enough to make me look much older, yet her inner self was very calm. We met at a mixer and started dating smoothly, leading to a quick marriage. Compared to the beautiful Susan, I'm not exactly handsome, but Susan had a fondness for me. I worked as a writer, handling various types of articles as a contract job, which were published on websites and magazines. Before I met her in person, Susan was aware that I was working as a writer. Susan regularly checked my works, and thankfully, she developed an interest in me. I think you definitely have talent, Mark. I will work hard to make your dream come true. Susan always said this to me. Yes. Even though I was a writer, when I was married to Susan, I was just juggling a few freelance jobs, not possessing enough financial power to be the breadwinner of the family. I had wanted to be a full-fledged writer since I was 24. Before that, I worked as a regular full-time employee. Before I got married to Susan, I was barely getting by, living off my savings, but after we got married, Susan worked hard as a full-time employee and supported our household. Susan is a smart and excellent woman, with outstanding knowledge in IT, and she was doing a great job at her company. I was taking advantage of Susan's actions, and while I was doing my writing work at home, I also did all the housework. I thought I would do the housework perfectly since I couldn't get results at work. I'm home. Today's dinner looks delicious. Thank you, Mark. No, it's only natural for me to do this because you're working hard outside, Susan. I'm really grateful to you. I said that and shared a dinner table with Susan. The time I spent with Susan was really fun, and every moment was sparkling. The day will definitely come when your talent, Mark, will be recognized. I'm really cheering for you, Susan. I was moved by Susan's words. When you're a writer working at home, there were many times when you honestly felt like giving up. This job requires you to be perfect in solitude, and no one is by your side to tell you the correct answer. Back then, I was unable to get enough work and was losing confidence. But because Susan was there, I managed to keep myself from breaking down. Susan, thank you. I can be positive because you are here. I'll keep working hard as a writer. I will always support you, Mark. We continued our married life in this way, always respecting each other. I really loved Susan, and I wanted to be with her forever. But my feelings were overturned by a certain incident. One day, while I was out shopping for dinner, I bumped into an old acquaintance. His name was Peter, a man at my age who had also attended the mixer where I first met Susan. Mark, is that you, shopping on a weekday? Are you off today? Peter, in his crisp suit, asked me. He must have been returning from making sales calls. Peter, a handsome elite who worked in sales at a large corporation, was a highly competent man. At that time, I was out shopping in a plain tracksuit, and feeling a bit embarrassed, I answered, "Haha, I guess you could say every day is like a day off for me." So, does that mean Susan is the one working? Yeah, I'm not making much at the moment, so that's how it is. How pathetic. I didn't immediately understand what Peter meant. He let out a heavy sigh, looked at me with a disappointed face, and continued. I fell in love with Susan at that mixer. She was someone I admired. But Susan didn't even glance at me. She chose you. If you had something attractive about yourself, I could have accepted it, but now, I'm disappointed. I was shocked by Peter's words. I had never imagined that he had feelings for Susan. Moreover, I never thought that such a mild-mannered and gentlemanly guy would berate me like this. Despite being deeply shaken, I managed to muster a forced smile and responded. Although, I might not have smiled properly due to my inner turmoil. Yeah, Susan is really a wife too good for me. If you understand that, why don't you step back? Peter gave me a cold look. It was a look of contempt from a fellow man. Susan is really pitiful. I bet she gets sympathy from her colleagues because her husband is like you. Susan is such a beautiful and wonderful woman. I still believe I could have made her happier than you, Mark. If you wish for her happiness, I recommend that you realize your place, even now. With that, Peter briskly walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling as though I had been struck on the head with a blunt object. I don't remember how I got home. But even after getting home, Peter's words kept flashing back in my mind, filling me with an unbearable feeling. It forced me to confront the inadequacy and inferiority I had vaguely felt as a husband. I have been married to Susan for 2 years, but as a writer, I haven't made any progress. My days are still filled with small jobs, and despite submitting my work to various companies hoping for a formal contract, but I'm getting no responses. I keep saying, I'll get results one day, but in reality, nothing changes. It's one thing to chase after a dream that might not come true by myself, but is it right to drag Susan along? Susan herself supports me and trusts me. But can I take responsibility if I fail to meet her expectations? Before I knew it, I was filled with self-pity, and tears welled up in my eyes. I'm home. Wait, Mark, what's going on? Susan, surprised by my unusual mood, rushed to my side. Susan is always so kind to me, and does so much for me. Despite this, I can't do anything for her. In that moment, I painfully realized this truth. Susan, let's get a divorce. The moment I said that, Susan looked at me with a startled expression. Oh, Mark, what happened? I'm no good. I can't make Susan happy. Susan seemed like she wanted to say something, but instead she just nodded gently and said, I understand. Maybe she could tell from the tears I shed. And so, in our 2nd year of marriage, we put a period to our life together. It was a divorce we both agreed to, so the proceedings went smoothly. Even at our last goodbye, Susan smiled and cheered me on. She looked so refreshed, and I knew then that this separation was the right thing. Susan is a serious person, and she must have felt obliged to support me, but at the same time, she must have felt burdened. Mark, promise me this at least. I'll be waiting for you to succeed as a writer. Even at this parting, Susan was kind. Feeling her considerateness, I let out a small stream of tears as I said goodbye. Yeah, I'll keep on writing. After parting with Susan, I dedicated myself more to writing than ever before. Before, when Susan was around, we would go out as a couple, but now I am truly alone. Thankfully, I have plenty of time. I wrote and wrote as if I were possessed. Sometimes when I felt like giving up, I would think alternately of Peter and Susan. I wanted to become a man who could make Peter, who looked down on me, look up to me, and I was determined to fulfill my promise to Susan. By doing this, I was able to motivate myself and make more achievement in my work than ever before. My writing improved and I started to get higher-paying jobs. Then I thought I'd enter a contest in a web media, so I found a promising contest in a magazine and applied. As a result, I was hired by a major web media company. I was going to be employed as a full-time writer, so I could expect a stable life, promotions, and raises from now on. Most importantly, I was told that I might be able to take on assignments from publishing companies, and I might even be asked to travel overseas for cover stories. I wanted to write various articles and send them out to the world. It was a moment when my dream came true. I did it. I shouted with joy in my empty room. I wish I could have shared this moment with Susan. It will soon be 2 years since I divorced her. I'm still alone, but I'm sure she, the charming woman, has already been blessed with a new good encounter. For me, that's the greatest joy. There are plenty of men who are more suitable for Susan than me, a cowardly man. Yes, like that Peter. She can choose as many handsome and wealthy men as she wants. I have to move on too. With that thought, I said goodbye to Susan again in my heart, but later I was to be hit by an unexpected situation. A few days later, I went directly to the major web media company that had hired me. Normally, since I'm a writer, I can work remotely, but from now on, I need to have meetings with the editor in charge at the office. So, first of all, I had to greet all the employees. And after the greeting and the tour of the company, a welcome party for me was held. I was truly grateful for such a warm welcome. After a long while, I put on a suit and, nervously, I set foot into the company. I'm nervous. The company exuded a modern feel, its marble floors sparkling and shining. I was immediately overwhelmed by the stylish and contemporary office. "All right, Mr. Johnson, this way." Led by the young president in his 40s, I stepped into the PC room where everyone was waiting. I am Mark Johnson, who has been appointed as an exclusive writer for this company. In the midst of introducing myself, I was left speechless. Unbelievably, the woman I thought I would never see again was standing in front of me. "What? Why is Susan here?" As I expressed my surprise and widened my eyes, Susan was also taken aback. I never dreamed of meeting my ex-wife, whom I had divorced 2 years ago, in such a circumstance. But I couldn't stand there silently any longer in front of everyone. Though I still have much to learn, I look forward to working with all of you. I finished my faltering greeting and bowed deeply. Even while everyone was giving a warm applause, my mind was filled with thoughts of Susan. Why was she working at this company? The president later gave a detailed explanation about the company's facilities and system, but I regretfully was somewhat preoccupied. The encounter earlier was too shocking. In the evening, a welcome party for me was held, and we went to a restaurant with 30 company members. During the party, I asked the president about Susan. The president, who was in a good mood from drinking, talked eloquently about Susan. Yes, we had hunted Susan because she was so competent and made her an executive of our company. Becoming an executive all of a sudden, that's impressive. Susan was working in web marketing at her previous company, and attracting customers on the web is her forte. Also, she had excellent grades in the Department of Humanities at a national university, so of course she has excellent writing skills and talent as an editor. In fact, she's really standing out in our company. I'm really glad we hired her. Just as the president said, Susan had excellent grades at the Department of Humanities at a national university. She had told me herself that when she was job hunting, she struggled to decide whether to work at a publishing company or an IT company. But in this company, she can showcase both of her skills, which is perfect for her. As I was thinking this, Susan came over to me. I was relieved because I was worried she might avoid me. "Mark, it's been a long time." I was surprised. "I never expected to meet you again like this." "Me neither." Seeing Susan up close after a long time, I was unexpectedly nervous. Even after 2 years apart, she was still as charming as ever. To be able to talk so naturally again. I never even dreamed of this. But really, congratulations. Our web media gets a lot of various work frequently. I'm very honored to be able to work with you, Mark. I look forward to working with you in the future. Same here, I look forward to it. And so we began our relationship as a good business partner. The company's culture suited me, and I was able to concentrate on writing in a comfortable and enjoyable environment. I visited the office regularly for work meetings and actively communicated with Susan. She was such a competent woman and gave me precise instructions. Mark, last month's article was a hit in terms of traffic. There was a lot of feedback from people wanting to read more, so I'm thinking of turning it into a series. That's great news. Is there anything I should pay attention to? In this way, we meticulously discussed our work. Every time we compared our ideas, the results visibly improved, and being evaluated directly like this also motivated me. Honestly, I never dreamed that a day would come when I could interact with Susan in this way. I used to respect Susan, but I was always riddled with complexes. Even though Susan was cheering me on, I continued to feel pathetic in my constant anxiety and feelings of inferiority. But now it's different. I have confidence in myself now, and I no longer feel inferior as I used to. Susan herself must feel this change in the air, and I can say with certainty that our relationship feels better than before. Although we have been apart for 2 years, it seems that what we cultivated during that time was not in vain. I think I still love Susan. Half a year since I met with Susan again. I could feel my affection for Susan growing day by day. But I was the one who brought up the divorce, and there's no way Susan feels the same about me. Even from the perspective of her ex-husband, Susan is now sparkled. Susan, who was successful at work, was very attractive and radiant, a figure of admiration among the male employees. The kindness Susan shows me might just be for work, and in reality, I'm probably just a thing of the past. While my feelings for Susan grew stronger, I was trying to convince myself to give up, but an incident awaited us that would greatly shake our relationship. Here's to the growth of our company. Cheers. At the president's toast, all the employees raised their glasses and started toasting each other. Today was the regularly scheduled company-wide drinking party. Coincidentally, Susan was sitting next to me today, which made my heart beat fast. Unlike her serious suit style at work, Susan was cute in a dress today and had heavier makeup. I hadn't seen Susan like this in a while, and while I felt a fresh thrill, I also felt that Susan probably already had a new partner. There's no way such a wonderful woman would be left alone. I felt a little sting in my heart and fought to drown my feelings in alcohol, drinking at a high pace. But surprisingly, Susan next to me was drinking at an even higher pace. Was Susan always such a heavy drinker? Another whiskey and soda, please. Are you sure you're okay? Your face is all red. I'm fine. I'm not drunk. Susan said so, but she was clearly drunk. The drinking party started at 6 p.m., and by the second hour, Susan was completely drunk. After that, the other employees got excited about going to the second party, and Susan was saying, "Me too," and tried to follow them. But there was no way she could walk the streets safely in heels with being so drunk. Seeing her like this, I decided to take her home. Fortunately, the other members were too excited about the second party to tease us. I planned to go home as soon as I sent Susan safely to her house. But suddenly Susan started feeling unwell and turned pale, shivering. It appears that the drawbacks of drinking alcohol at a high pace have now caught up to her. From this bar to Susan's house it takes about an hour, but if we head to my apartment, it's only about a 15-minute ride. I immediately hailed a cab and headed straight to my apartment. It's unusual for Susan to end up like this. Thinking this, I was taking care of her in the cab. Susan, who's usually calm and composed, was completely drunk and out of her senses. Upon arriving at my apartment, I put Susan to bed. Susan was already fast asleep, and I kept watch over her the entire time. I never thought I'd see the day Susan would come back here. Naturally, all the days I spent with her began to resurface one after another in my mind. While cherishing those memories, I also felt a sort of melancholy. When she wakes up, she'll be leaving here promptly. We were supposed to be over, yet that fact felt unbearably sad to me. As I was indulging in these indescribable feelings, she quietly woke up. Looking at the clock, nearly 3 hours had passed since Susan came to my place. She had been lying quietly for a while, and it seemed like the alcohol had somewhat worn off. Susan was looking around the room wide-eyed. Why am I here? I brought you here because you were drunk and intoxicated, Susan. I wanted to take you home, but you didn't seem well. I'm sorry, that was irresponsible of me. No, it's all right, but you should avoid drinking like that. It's especially dangerous for a woman. Here, have some water. Just as I was about to hand Susan a bottle of water, she clung to me. I was momentarily frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. At that moment, Susan was quietly shedding big, round tears. When you were sitting next to me, I was so nervous. I drank that much to hide my nervousness. But you're really kind. Susan. Hearing Susan's words, I was stunned. I didn't expect Susan to be conscious of me in that way. I like you, Mark. I realized that after rereading your articles, the one on nursing I read before I met you at the mixer. Listening to Susan's story reminded me of her father, who passed away after we'd got married. Susan's father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease at a young age. Until he was admitted to a nursing home, Susan and her mill had been taking care of him at home. From my early 20s until I was 30, I was caught between work and caregiving. Honestly, I was exhausted. I despaired at my seemingly endless life, and I even began to resent my father. I hated myself for feeling that way about my father, whom I loved so much. Back then, Susan had apparently been weeping day in and day out. I couldn't possibly blame her when I heard that story back then. It's not easy for a young woman to give up romance and private life to focus on caregiving. Susan started reminiscing about those times. When I was feeling down about my father, I came across your writing, Mark, and it saved me. Not just the nursing articles, but your other articles were also truly wonderful. That's why I was really happy to meet you at the mixer. Saying that, Susan looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. The intensity of her expression echoed deeply within my heart. I was despairing of life, but just by glancing over the words that you, Mark, put together, I felt my will to live bubbling back up. There are such wonderful things in this world. Even when I was swamped with caregiving and couldn't go out, if I opened my laptop, I could encounter the world you had painted. You can't imagine how much that saved me. I was deeply touched to hear that Susan had been so moved by my articles. Thank you, but I feel like I've only caused trouble for you. No, that's not true. My happiness lies in seeing your dreams come true, Mark. There are definitely people out there who will be saved by your writing, just like me. I parted ways with you with a smile that day, but in reality, I was crying inside. If my presence added to your pressure, I'm really sorry. That's not true, because you were there, Susan. I could keep writing. Saying that, I held Susan tightly. We may have misunderstood and passed each other by, but we can start over from here. As we spent the night together, we felt more connected than ever before. This was the first time either of us had experienced such unity of feelings. Thus, We reaffirmed our love for each other and decided to restart our relationship. Ideally, I wanted to remarry immediately, but a new challenge presented itself to us. Wait, I will be in charge of an interview articles overseas. The president's words left me shocked, and as I froze, he continued to speak as if to say, "Aren't you thrilled? Yes, a major publisher wants you on their team. They'll cover all costs, and it'll surely boost your career. You get to travel to various countries for a year, gaining plenty of experience. Isn't it a dream job?" While it was an attractive offer, it meant being away from Susan for a year. I was conflicted about whether to go or not, but Susan welcomed the offer with a smile. "That's amazing. It's a valuable experience to travel around the world. I'd love to read about the world as seen through Mark's eyes." Susan's words took me by surprise. At the same time, I felt foolish for having worried so much. That's right. Distance and time are no issue. Even if there are periods when we can't see each other, as long as there's love and writing, we can overcome anything. "Yeah, you're right. I'll become a bigger man in preparation for our marriage, Susan." And so, I accepted the offer and set off on a one-year research trip. Susan was there at the airport to see me off, a glittering engagement ring on her right hand. When I returned, I intended to present her with a large wedding ring for her left hand. "Take care." "Yeah, I'll do my best." With smiles on our faces, we began walking towards a bright future. "You saw it, didn't you?" As she muttered this to me, I awkwardly but honestly nodded. After all, there's nothing to be done about what I'd accidentally seen, the image of her that was spinning in my mind, refusing to leave. Yeah, what I had unintentionally seen while I was heavily drunk was. My name is Steve Patterson. I'm just a typical office worker. I was leading a moderately enjoyable life until today when things became a little out of the ordinary. I'm on a company trip. We're staying at this old but charming inn, complete with a hot spring and clean rooms. It's pretty awesome. Our company isn't that big, only about 20 people, but this year we'd performed particularly well, so they decided to give us nice accommodations. 2 male staff share a room and female staff got a single room. There aren't many female staff, and it's probably a special treat for our top performer, Catherine. Catherine is a stunning top saleswoman. Despite being my coworker, she is nothing like me. She is excellent and kind, like a goddess. As you might imagine, she was surrounded by the boss and department manager during the banquet at our trip. The boss and manager were clearly smitten with the hostess. Amidst all this, my gaze was directed at Catherine. "Catherine, we have high hopes for you this year. You're our company's ace. Thank you." While watching her smile from afar, I sipped my drink. Even if it's pathetic, the thought of an average Joe like me drinking with Catherine felt audacious. As I was drinking like this, I ended up drinking more than I thought. The bosses were having a great time with the hostesses, and their boorish laughter echoed throughout the banquet hall. The female staff had returned to their rooms early because it was getting late, so it seemed like the bosses were having their fun time. Feeling dizzy from drinking too much, I made my exit in a hurry. My room was, although this was a traditional inn, unusually like a hotel, it had names and numbers on each room. Apparently, they used to have just names, but they started adding numbers to make it easier as they had more guests. Thanks to such efforts, this bed and breakfast has a long history as an established business. I looked at my room number. 30. There it is. The inn didn't have an auto lock, so I didn't need to bother unlocking the door. Also, as I had a habit of carrying all my valuables with me, I didn't lock my door since I didn't leave anything valuable in the room. I opened the door with a creak, took off my shoes, and opened the sliding door. But, for some reason, Catherine was in the room. The moment I saw it, my drunkenness instantly sobered, and I closed the door. Whoa, sorry, wrong room, oops. Even though I had sobered up, I was still staggering, and I stumbled on the threshold of the entrance and fell spectacularly. Wait, are you okay? Catherine tried to ask in a flustered manner, but she couldn't say anything. The scene was spinning in my head. She had a glamorous and fit body. Her skin was translucent white. I saw things in my head that I shouldn't have seen, yet they kept appearing over and over again. But then, I remembered the big bruise on her side. That bruise, I felt like I'd seen it somewhere. Even as I thought about this, perhaps because I was too drunk, I fell asleep right there at the entrance. A few hours later, I was prostrating myself before Catherine. It was to be expected. If Catherine made a complaint, there was no chance I would win. My life was to be decided by Catherine's forgiveness. Although Catherine looked displeased, she said, "You were really drunk, so I'll forgive you this time, but don't drink that much anymore." I'm sorry. Actually, it was quite embarrassing, but Catherine had put me to bed in her room after I fell asleep on the spot. I have shown her a pathetic sight, and my pride was completely crushed. No matter how kind a goddess she is, it's only natural that she would be disgusted by my series of actions. Just as I had prepared myself for this, she finally opened her mouth. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Her usual confident smile was nowhere to be found. She seemed a bit down, lacking confidence. From my perspective as a man, I had been shown a captivating scene, and I was actually thankful for it. As I was considering my words carefully to avoid causing a big problem, she murmured, "You saw the bruise, didn't you?" I saw it, but what about it? Doesn't it disappoint you? Everyone says so. If only it weren't for that bruise, I'd be perfect. I did see the bruise, but the impact of the other pots was too strong, and I didn't think that bruise was something I needed to worry about. I don't think there's such a thing as a perfect person. It's kind of like your trademark, and it's cool. I inadvertently blurted out those words. Then, she widened her eyes in surprise. At the same time, I felt a sense of déjà vu. Had I said this line somewhere before? "You're really different, Steve. You're the second person to say that to me." "Oh, was it your boyfriend? Isn't it well known in the office that I'm single? Are you being sarcastic?" I was told that by a classmate in elementary school. Well, I've transferred to another school due to my parents' circumstances, so I haven't seen him in a while. Upon hearing her say this, I exclaimed, "Ah, it's a distant memory, but there was a girl with a bruise in my class. I think it was around the 2nd grade. During gym class, while changing, one of the boys said to her, 'What's that black spot? So gross.' A few boys joined in the mockery, and she ended up crying. I remember saying the same thing to her. She ended up moving away, and I can't even remember her name anymore. Could it be Catherine?" Wasn't your elementary school before you moved? Maplewood Elementary." Yes, but how do you know that, Steve?" "Yeah, I just remembered that there was a girl in my class who had a birthmark like yours. You moved away before we went to the 4th grade, right?" "Yes, that's right." "Wait, Steve, were you the boy from back then?" It turns out, Catherine and I had attended the same elementary school. Catherine's parents divorced at the time, and she moved with her mother, changing her last name to her current one. I never thought I'd reunite with her as a coworker at the same company. But you remembered me after seeing me undressed. That's kind of awkward. I'm sorry about that." "It's fine, but we should probably head back to our rooms. It's late." I was feeling better, so I apologized to Catherine once more before heading back to my room. A month later, Catherine and I had gone close enough to have tea together occasionally. That's because Catherine had become a little comfortable with me, as I didn't get disappointed seeing her birthmark. We'd have tea, and sometimes even a drink or two. When we did, it was almost always time for Catherine's ranting session. Why does nobody value you? Because I'm just not that good. What are you talking about? You quietly handle administrative tasks and help others without anyone noticing. You need to assert yourself more. Catherine's complaints were mostly about my job evaluation. I'm simply doing what I think will make everyone's job easier, nothing more. Catherine insists that it's incredible, but I think it's an overstatement. When I say so, Catherine always pouts. Seeing her like that was kind of cute, and I thought our relationship would continue like this forever. But then an incident occurred that marked the end of this relationship. Catherine said she was going to meet a client, and then all contact with her was cut off. Our company deals with dyeing, and Catherine was supposed to be visiting a factory in the countryside today, but she hasn't returned to the office for hours. No one can get in touch with Catherine, and the factory says she came for a visit and then left. Even when the work hours ended, Catherine hadn't come back, and her mother, who is her emergency contact, also didn't know where she was. I was supposed to be done for the day, but it was hard to believe that the Catherine would go somewhere without reporting to the office. I decided to go looking for Catherine after work. The road leading to the factory is rarely used by vehicles. It was dark at night, and there was little I could do on my own other than look down at the mountain from the road, but maybe there was some kind of clue. As I was driving, I found Catherine's car stopped on the side of the road. But Catherine was nowhere to be found. The driver's seat door was open and the keys were still in the ignition. "Catherine, where are you?" It was when I shouted. "Steve, is that you?" A frail voice could be heard from the other side of the guardrail, meaning it was from the woods. Beyond the guardrail, there wasn't a paved slope, and at the bottom of it was where I found Catherine. Her clothes were tattered as if she had fallen down. She was weakly raising her hand in distress. I immediately contacted the paramedics, and Catherine was rescued. During her fall, she twisted her ankle and had some minor scrapes, but thankfully, her life was not in danger. She mentioned that her car had broken down on her way back from the client's place. While checking out the issue, she lost her balance due to her high heels and fell through a gap in the guardrail. Catherine wondered, "Why were you there, Steve?" "I'm glad you were, but it's strange." So, I told her, "I thought something might have happened. I was looking for you because I knew you weren't the type to skip work without telling anyone." Hearing this, she blushed and smiled. "How about going to the aquarium next time, as a thank you?" This was clearly an invitation for a date. It was different from the usual casual suggestion for drinks. This had me puzzled, but I declined her offer. "Let's go when you're fully recovered. You've twisted your ankle after all. We should start with somewhere closer. I'd like to be the one to ask you out to the aquarium." Upon hearing this, Catherine seemed pleased. There was a reason why I declined. I had planned to ask her out to the aquarium myself and confess my feelings to her. A man should make the first move. Well, that's just my pride talking. But, in the end, I wasn't able to ask her to go to the aquarium. The reason being, a week after Catherine's accident, we were informed that our company was to be merged. It was so sudden and surprising. But given the shaky performance of the company, I could understand if the boss was doing this to protect our livelihoods. We had good performance this year, but we had been struggling for the past few years. The grand company trip we had, that was the last of it. That's why it was so luxurious. So, it was inevitable for the company to merge. But the problem was with the company we were merging with. It was a major fashion company, and we were to be assigned to its newly established dyeing department. And the boss of that company was Catherine's mother. After her divorce, she had started a small company and had built it up to its current size. When I went missing, the boss contacted my mom, right? When he called her again saying I was found, she started looking into the company. Catherine's mother had always let her live her life the way she wanted, never interfering in her work, but she had gotten worried that the company environment might not be good, given her daughter's predicament. Upon investigating, she fell in love with our dying work. The boss talks swiftly concluded given the dismal business performance of our company. The paperwork is still in process, but it seems to be ongoing. A company transfer. I was thinking about this nonchalantly when suddenly the boss tapped me on the shoulder. "Steve, can I talk to you for a moment?" The boss was looking at me seriously. Could it be that he's going to say, "I'm sorry, but you're fired"? The pressure from the boss was intense. Yes. The truth is, you're the only one being transferred to a different department." "What? Am I not in the dying department?" I was surprised as I received an explanation from the boss. Apparently, based on the recommendation from a woman named Catherine, I was the only one assigned to the main office. I was shocked by this, but Catherine too was going to be assigned to the office. When I told my mom about your hard work, she said she wanted you in the office. She's a tough person even with her own family, so it wasn't just because I recommended you. It's based on your achievements," Catherine said. I was perplexed by what Catherine said, but I wanted to make the most of this opportunity that I had been given. Besides, I didn't want to disgrace Catherine, who had recommended me. "I'll do my best." And thus, I progressed in my new company, which was about 20 years ago now. I'm in my 50s now. But thanks to my hard work back then, I'm now an assistant to the CEO. The company has grown significantly under a new CEO, but the new boss keeps me busy. At work and even at home. "Steve, where's the wine?" "Come on, Catherine, you're drinking too much." I scold my wife, Catherine, who has finished a whole bottle of wine at home. Since joining the office, we work together more, and although I originally intended to confess my feelings at the aquarium, Catherine confessed to me first. And so, we started dating, and then got married. We've been blessed with children, and we're leading a successful life together. Catherine took over the company, and I'm supporting her, but no matter how many years pass, Catherine keeps leading me. I find it absolutely endearing. Why not? It's our home, so it's okay to get drunk. You'll catch a cold if you sleep on the floor again. I don't need to hear that from you. I was at a loss for words. We've been together for 20 years, but she never fails to make fun of me. But I'm not upset. After all, if it weren't for that incident, I wouldn't have been able to spend time with her like this. All right, if you get too drunk, I'm sleeping on the couch. I don't want to sleep alone, so I'll stop drinking. Catherine says, smiling. I want to stay together until our smiles become all wrinkled. Thinking so, we enjoy our evening drinks in moderation, as always. My name is Ethan. I'm 27 years old. I'm just a typical office worker. I use a computer all day at work, but right now, I can't see the screen clearly. Phew, I try to take a deep breath with my eyes closed, but they just won't open. I'm feeling dizzy. I've been struggling to get through my work, relying on caffeine from coffee to push through the day. Finally, it's the end of the workday. As everyone else is calling it a day, I lean both elbows on my desk, rest my forehead on them and close my eyes, thinking, finally, time to go home. Hey, are you okay? You've been looking a bit off lately, like you're not feeling well. My boss, Robert, talks to me with a concerned voice from behind. No, I'm just sleep deprived. Sorry, I'll be more careful. Seeing Robert look worried, I decide to tell him the truth. I thought he would scold me for staying up late, but instead, he seemed worried about my lack of sleep. "Is something going on? Insomnia is pretty serious," he says, expressing his concern. I really wanted to reassure him, but it's true that I'm struggling. While it's none of Robert's business, I decide to tell him about the cause of my insomnia. A month ago, a new neighbor moved into the room next to mine. My apartment is a rundown corner unit on the first floor, and the room next to mine had been vacant for a while. A student-looking guy moved in during the moving season, and he'd been making a noise every night, bringing friends over. He seems to be a night owl, making noise, shouting, and occasionally causing the wall to shake. Additionally, it seems someone new moved into the room above mine as well, who runs the washing machine at night and stomps around loudly. I used to hear the sounds of the neighbors' doors opening and closing, but I didn't realize how thin the walls were because the room next to mine had been vacant. Due to these disturbances, I've been waking up several times during the night and suffering from sleep deprivation. I don't want to have issues with my neighbors, but it's been unbearable, so I reported the situation to the landlord. Despite my report, the situation didn't improve. I talked to the landlord again, but he just said that he'd left a note for them and didn't seem like he could do anything more. I guess I have to put up with it as the rent is cheap, but it's really tough, I told Robert. After hearing all this, he said, "I see, that's quite a predicament. Lack of sleep can ruin your health. I understand your situation now, but don't hesitate to take a day off if you're not feeling well, okay?" I felt grateful for his kindness and hoped that things would be better. However, even after another 2 weeks, the noise problem continued. I used to live in a shared house near my university when I was a student. So, I thought I had a certain level of tolerance for noise. But this noise is too much for me. At the shared house, we had strict rules, and if someone broke them, they would be warned and eventually kicked out by the owner if they didn't change their behavior. As it's a convenient location for commuting and the low rent, I chose this rent-down apartment, but now I think the shared house was a much better choice. I don't want to underperform at work. So, another day passed with me fighting sleep deprivation with the help of caffeine. As Robert was passing by, he talked to me. "You still look pale. Don't push yourself too hard. I want to talk to you later, okay?" and patted my shoulder. At the end of the day, Robert came to me and asked, "Can we talk in the meeting room?" I thought I was going to be reprimanded for looking so run down, but the words that came out of Robert's mouth took me by surprise. "Ethan, you must be having a hard time. Why don't you come stay at my place?" From the look on his face, it seemed like he wasn't joking. Apparently, he had been worried about me and had discussed it with his wife. Turned out that his wife also concerned for my health, suggesting that I should stay at their place to prevent me from collapsing. "You're still living in that apartment you rented when you got your first paycheck, aren't you? You should be able to afford a better place by now. Have you considered moving? But you probably can't hold up until you find a new apartment, right? For the time being, you should rest up at our house, okay?" I didn't expect such concern and tried to politely decline, feeling a bit guilty, but Mr. Robert insisted, humorously promising delicious home-cooked meals if I decided to stay. I didn't give an answer at that time, deciding to think about it more when I got home. My run-down apartment was not too bad, as long as there was no noise. However, the incessant noisy disturbances made me decide to move out. I felt the urgent need for a peaceful place to rest. I was on the brink of collapsing. But my family lives out of the state, and I had no friends in the vicinity to rely on. Although I felt guilty for inconveniencing Mr. and Mrs. Robert, I decided to accept their generous offer and stay with them until I found a new place. I had a moment of hesitation about living in the same house as my boss, but then again, it was not that much different from living in a shared house. I felt like I was imposing, but I decided to take them up on their offer. The next day, I gave Mr. Robert my answer and immediately started looking for a new place. It was decided that I would start staying at the Roberts' house from the following Sunday. And then the day has come. When I arrived at Mr. Roberts' house, Mrs. Robert welcomed me with a warm smile. I expressed my gratitude for their hospitality, to which she responded, "Don't be so nervous," as they helped me with my luggage and showed me to the room. "There's some time before dinner, why not relax a little?" she suggested, and the three of us had a light conversation. "It's been a while since we saw you, John. You've really matured," Mrs. Robert commented. Actually, it was not my first time visiting their home. Back then, you used to bring your young colleagues over to our house for drinks. We don't see much of that these days, do we? I remember the times when I was a new recruit and Mr. Robert used to invite me over. He was always considerate of his subordinates and communicated with them a lot at his home. When drinking with boss, there is often the exhaustion of having to listen to their heroic stories or their preaching about work. But Mr. Robert was different. Even when he talked about work, he was never imposing. He always listened carefully, which made him well loved by the younger staff. As we reminisced, Mr. Robert suddenly turned serious, saying, "Oh, I almost forgot. I have to tell you something important." He turned to me, a serious expression on his face. "We have a daughter living with us, John. I'm sure you understand, but don't try anything, all right?" His tone changed drastically as he stared intently at me. Mrs. Robert couldn't help but laugh at his stern demeanor. "I don't think John would do such a thing, but our daughter is quite pretty, you know," Mr. Robert said, his stern face softening slightly into a smirk. His wife chuckled, "You're still overly protective as always." I remembered their daughter from her student days, and indeed, she was a beautiful girl even then. Their daughter, Amy, had just graduated from college this spring, and she started working as a hotel staff at the front desk. I met Amy at dinner time. We were having dinner without her as she was coming home late, when we heard her voice from the entrance, "I'm home." I greeted her at the dining table, apologizing for starting dinner without her. But when I looked up and got a proper look at her, I was momentarily stunned. Amy had grown up into a striking beauty. "No problem at all, take your time," she said. Amy smiled and said something that had everyone at the table nodding in agreement. "She's so beautiful. It's no wonder the boss is so protective of her," we all thought. Amy then went to her room to drop off her bags, then took the seat next to me. At that point, the boss paused. Hang on a sec," he said, appearing flustered. The boss turned to Amy, who was about to start eating, and said, "You can't sit next to him, Amy. Come sit over here." He wanted her to switch seats with him. "She's a girl who's not yet married, after all. We can't let her sit next to a guy so casually," he joked. Yet, there was a serious look in his eyes. We all ended up laughing at our overly protective boss. Before going to bed, I took a bath. "Ethan, can you drink herbal tea?" When I got out of the bath, the boss's wife asked me so. When I replied that I was able to, she said, "That's great, herbal tea helps you sleep," and made some for me. We were all sitting comfortably in the living room drinking herbal tea, when suddenly the boss said, as if he had remembered something, "Ethan, you're good at English, right?" When I nodded, he turned to Amy and said, "Amy, we've got a teacher right here." I saw Amy's eyes light up. When I asked why, she explained that she uses English a lot in her work at the hotel's front desk. The hotel is a Japanese-oriented, so a lot of foreign tourists visit there, so she had to pass an English test to get hired. But, apparently, actual practice is quite difficult, and she's a bit insecure about phrasing and such. I actually spent 3 years abroad in high school. I followed my father on his overseas assignment and lived there. Even now, I can still speak English because I occasionally have to deal with people from English-speaking countries at work. Today, I just want you to rest. I don't want to push you, but if you're feeling better, could you take a look at my daughter's English? The boss asked me this, and Amy also requested it. Of course, I agreed. Thanks to the boss and his family's kindness, I was able to sleep well that night, and I recovered a few days later. Going to work with the boss every morning was a strange feeling, but I got to hear all sorts of work stories from him, and it made me feel like a new employee again. I also felt happy that we could now talk as equals. His wife, who is a housewife, was really good to me. The food was delicious, and she even did my laundry. I was so grateful I didn't know what to say. The boss and I, who both have the weekends off, started having a drink together on Saturday nights. He used to drink every night, but now he's being health conscious and only allows himself to drink on Saturday nights. We enjoyed the evening with food prepared by the boss. I was surprised that he could cook, and we had a great time talking over drinks. As I listened to the boss talk and nodded, I suddenly became emotional. He talks the stories about his daughter with kind tone. His wish for happiness for his family, and his advice to me to walk a similar path in life. Watching him, I couldn't help but think of my own father. My father passed away before I became an adult. Just after we returned from the 3-year overseas assignment, my father passed away. I remembered the time shortly before he died when he told me, "Ethan, when you become an adult, I want to share a drink with you." Maybe it was also because the boss's gentle way of speaking was so much like my father's. If my father were alive now, would he be like this? Thinking that, tears streamed down on my face. "Hey, what's wrong?" Turning to my side, I found myself crying, no doubt surprising my boss. "No, I'm good. Just drunk a little too much." I shrugged it off with a sheepish response, but couldn't help the tears from spilling out, even as I tried to hold them back. "No, I apologize. I was just thinking of my dad," I admitted candidly. Then, I talked about the promise I couldn't keep with my father. "Is that so?" There were tears in my boss's eyes as he said that. "Your father would be proud if he saw you now, Ethan. You've grown into a hard-working, good guy." He said that, patting my shoulder reassuringly. The words just made me cry even more. His tone was just like my father's. It felt like my dad was talking to me. That night became a special one for me. As we promised, I used the spare time in the evening to tutor Amy. Her days off changed due to her shift schedule and her being a new employee, but she comes home early. We are able to find common time. She asks me about the conversations she struggles with, what she couldn't understand on that day. I answer her questions, and she actively asks me for more. I advise her on how native speakers would say it, the polite way of phrasing things. Amy diligently takes notes, practices pronunciation with me. To respond to her enthusiasm, I do role-playing exercises with her repeatedly to make her more practical in conversation and actions. Initially, I was nervous around Amy, but recently, we've been able to chat casually. We've started trying to make these small talks in English, making it a bit of a game, and we've become somewhat friendly. Before I know it, It's almost a month since I moved into my boss's place. Although I've been constantly looking for a new place, the good ones seem to fill up before I can even go see them. Maybe it's the season. I've been looking around without sticking to a single real estate agency, but whether it's bad luck or poor timing or just my searching method, I start to feel anxious. I can't keep relying on my boss indefinitely, I thought at that time. Speaking of which, Ethan, no, it's okay, yeah. My boss nervously started to speak. Ethan, you haven't moved out of your old apartment yet, have you? I was surprised, feeling as if he'd read my mind. I uttered, no, it's fine. You can stay as long as you like. But Ethan, you've gotten comfortable here, haven't you? He said, grinning knowingly, but it was true, even though it was at odds with my anxious feelings. I'm sorry, honestly, I'm very comfortable here, I said, and my boss laughed heartily. Although I had a lot of trouble finding a place, I ended up finding a place that was far better than what I originally aimed for. Thankfully, it was okay to move in as soon as possible. Once I secured my new place, I notified the landlord of my current apartment about my departure. Because the move was so sudden, I ended up having to pay for 2 places for a month, but I couldn't continue to rely on my boss for another month. Accepting it as it's unavoidable, I quickly started to prepare for the move. Moreover, my boss said he would help move things if I didn't have too much luggage. I ended up relying on him until the day of the move. On the day I left my boss's house, I made sure to thank his wife sincerely. I had stayed at their place for about a month, being cared for in every way. In gratitude, I prepared something to serve as a sort of rent payment, but both the boss and his wife refused, saying it wasn't necessary. You tutored our daughter, so we're even, they said. After some time passed living in my new apartment, while I enjoyed the comfortable life, I also felt nostalgic for the time spent at my boss's place. I had been thinking to visit them again. Excuse me, boss. I'd really like to express my gratitude properly. May I come over next Saturday? I asked nervously. He replied, no need for thanks, but we can ring together again. My daughter is off next Saturday, so it's perfect timing. Although he seemed happy, I was a bit nervous. On Saturday evening, as I rang the doorbell at the boss's house, he greeted me cheerfully. Tonight, my wife and Amy prepared a feast because they knew you were coming. Come on in. Both his wife and Amy greeted me with smiles. First things first, Ethan, let's have a beer and toast. As my boss went to pour the beer, I stopped him. Wait, boss. I have something to say before that. At my words, his wife and Amy moved closer. Seeing this, the boss looked surprised, but his wife calmed him down, saying, just let him speak. Then, I stepped back and spoke out. Boss, I have been dating your daughter, and I wanted to formally let you know. With that, I bowed deeply. When I lifted my face, the boss seemed frozen, deep in thought. After a while, he finally asked, what do you mean by that? Then Amy came next to me and said to her father, I fell in love with him. His wife added, Ethan is a wonderful person, isn't he? And she and Amy giggled. Seeing this, the boss was flustered. You knew about this. His wife and Amy exchanged glances and started laughing. I didn't know anything about this, Ethan. What is this all about? The boss tried to regain some fatherly dignity, but his wife chuckled. Aren't you actually pleased? Exposed by his wife, the boss was flustered and said, don't say things like that. She continued, you said it would be nice to have a son like Ethan drinking alone after he left. That was when my wife blurted it out, and I was taken aback, saying, don't mention that. Can't help it if it's Ethan. No, seriously you guys. Grumbled our team lead with a mix of joy and disbelief. I handed him the gift I'd brought. There is his favorite brand of liquor inside. Seeing this, he chuckled, "Nice choice. All right, you're forgiven. Let's have a celebratory drink to your relationship with my daughter, Amy." He had given us his blessing. We shared drinks and stories. "Oh, I might be a bit tipsy," he admitted, a perpetual smile on his face. From the way he was talking, it seemed he was quite drunk. "Listen, Ethan, if you don't make my daughter happy, you won't get off easily. But I'm glad the first guy she brought home is you, Ethan. I'm glad it wasn't some weirdo. Please take good care of my daughter." It felt as if I was announcing our marriage, even though I had only intended to announce our relationship. But it did become reality. 3 years since then, the team lead is now my father-in-law. Rather, he has become more of a father to me. I used to say I wish I had a son like Ethan, and now it's really happened. "Ethan, let's keep this going." It's our usual Saturday. Now, we enjoyed drinks together with Amy and my mother-in-law. How was that? Subscribing the channel gives us encouragement to produce more. See you in the next video.